Frank Mitchell yawned and stretched in his chair at the lunar observatory. The night shift was always quiet, but he enjoyed the peace. His eyes scanned the monitors that tracked deep space activity beyond Pluto. The year 2157 had been uneventful so far, which was fine by him. He took a sip of his coffee and nearly choked when an alert flashed on his screen. An energy signature unlike anything in their database had appeared? He blinked to make sure he wasn't seeing things. The signature pulsed in patterns too regular to be natural. Frank's heart raced as he verified the readings again. This was it. The moment scientists had theorized about for centuries. He pressed the emergency contact button. "This is Dr. Frank Mitchell at Lunar Observatory Station. I need to speak with Director Powell immediately. We have a situation." Within hours, the United Nations Space Coalition headquarters buzzed with activity. People rushed through corridors, carrying tablets filled with data. In the main conference room, Director Alan Powell stood before a group of serious-faced officials. The energy signature Dr. Mitchell detected shows clear signs of artificial design. "We believe this is first contact." His words hung in the air. "We are dispatching the UN's Horizon to investigate." Captain Diane Rogers received her orders with a calm that hid her excitement. At 45, she had commanded the research vessel for 7 years, but nothing compared to this mission. She gathered her crew for briefing in the ship's main hall. "We leave in 6 hours. This is not a drill. This is not a false alarm. We may be the first humans to make contact with an alien civilization." Communication specialist Lisa Bennett sat quietly in the back, her mind racing. She had trained for this possibility, but now that it might be happening, she felt unprepared. Next to her, Security Officer Chris Martinez nodded thoughtfully. His job was to keep the crew safe, and that suddenly seemed much harder. The UN's Horizon left Earth orbit with little fanfare. The mission was classified, though rumors spread quickly. It took 11 days to reach the coordinates beyond Pluto's orbit. The crew grew more tense with each passing day. When they arrived, the ship's sensors confirmed what the Lunar Observatory had detected. "Captain, you need to see this," said the navigation officer. His voice trembling slightly, Rogers moved to the main viewport and felt her breath catch. A massive vessel hung in space before them, at least 20 times the size of their ship. Its surface gleamed with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change as they watched. "All stop. Hold position at current distance." "Bennett, prepare. All first contact protocols." Lisa nodded and moved to her station. Years of training kicked in as she prepared a series of simple mathematical sequences designed to establish basic communication. She transmitted the first sequence and waited. The response came almost immediately. The alien vessel returned the sequence with the next logical numbers added. Lisa continued with more complex mathematical concepts. Each time the response came, quickly and correctly. "They understand," she whispered. "They're communicating." Over the next few hours, Lisa established a rudimentary communication system. The aliens identified themselves as the Vryaxian Collective. They transmitted images showing their physical form, tall, slender beings with 4 arms and smooth, pale skin. Their faces had large eyes and no visible mouth. Lisa worked with the ship's AI to develop a translation program. "They say they've been observing our solar system for some time," Lisa reported to Captain Rogers. "They waited until we reached a certain technological threshold before making contact. They consider us ready for—" "I think the closest translation is partnership or alliance," Rogers nodded thoughtfully. "Ask them their intentions." The exchange continued for hours. The Vryaxians claimed to be peaceful explorers, part of a vast network of civilizations across the galaxy. They offered to share knowledge and technology in exchange for cultural exchange. "They're requesting permission to send a delegation to Earth," Lisa said. "They want to establish formal diplomatic relations." Director Powell, connected via secure channel from Earth, looked concerned. "Can we trust them?" "Their communications appear sincere," Lisa replied. "They've provided technological data as a gesture of goodwill. Our scientists confirm it's far beyond our current capabilities." Powell consulted with Earth's leaders for several hours before responding. We will allow a small delegation to visit Earth under strict security protocols. Captain Rogers, your ship will escort their representatives. Chris Martinez watched the proceedings with a careful eye. Something about the situation made him uneasy, though he couldn't pinpoint why. When a small shuttle detached from the Vryaxian vessel, he insisted on leading the security team that would first board it. The shuttle contained 3 Vryaxians who introduced themselves through a translator device. Their leader, Ambassador Kravtal, spoke in a series of clicks and whistles that the device converted to English. We greet humanity as worthy equals. We have watched your species overcome great challenges. Your resilience impresses us. We offer friendship and knowledge. The journey back to Earth was tense but uneventful. The Vryaxians remained in their quarters, emerging only for scheduled meetings. They seemed fascinated by human culture, asking endless questions about art, music, and history. They appeared especially interested in human biology, requesting detailed medical information which Earth's leaders cautiously provided when they arrived at Earth. Media coverage was carefully managed. The existence of aliens could cause panic, so initial announcements were vague, mentioning only a significant diplomatic development. The Vryaxian delegation was taken to a secure facility in Geneva where world leaders gathered to meet them. Ambassador Kravtal addressed the assembly with what seemed like genuine warmth. We come as friends to a young species showing great promise. The galaxy can be dangerous. Together we can ensure mutual protection and advancement. The Vryaxians offered immediate gifts, medical technology that could cure several human diseases, energy systems that produce clean power, and computing advances that solved problems humans had struggled with. For decades, scientists verified the technology worked exactly as promised. Public opinion quickly shifted from fear to excitement. Within weeks, the first Vryaxian embassy opened in Geneva, and cultural exchange programs began. Chris Martinez remained uneasy. During routine security monitoring, he noticed patterns in Vryaxian communications that didn't match their translator's output. Small discrepancies that might mean nothing or might mean everything. He began keeping private notes, careful not to alarm anyone without proof. 6 weeks after first contact, Martinez approached Captain Rogers in her office at UNSC headquarters. Captain, something doesn't feel right about our new friends. Rogers looked up from her desk. What do you mean? Their translation program sometimes activates when they're not speaking to us. I've detected encrypted signals being sent back to their main vessel, and their questions seem too focused on our defenses and biology. Rogers frowned. That's hardly proof of bad intentions, Chris. I know, but I can't shake this feeling. They're hiding something. Keep watching, but be discreet. The last thing we need is a diplomatic incident based on a hunch. Martinez nodded and left. That night, he started a secure file on his personal device labeled simply Vryaxian Inconsistencies. He had no idea then how important that file would become, or that he had just taken the first step in saving humanity from a fate worse than extinction. As dawn broke over Geneva, the Vryaxian embassy glowed with strange lights, and inside, Ambassador Kravtal sent a message to the main fleet. Phase 1 complete. Beginning dependency creation. 6 months after the Vryaxians arrived on Earth, their embassy in Geneva had become the center of global attention. Lines of people formed each day hoping to catch a glimpse of the aliens who had changed human life so dramatically. Ambassador Kravtal made regular public appearances, always speaking of friendship and shared progress. The changes came quickly. Vryaxian medical technology cured cancer in weeks. Their energy systems began replacing fossil fuels, and food production increased worldwide. People who had opposed the alien presence now fell silent as benefits spread. Across the globe, Dr. Karen Phillips walked through the sliding doors of the Embassy Research Wing with a sense of wonder that had not faded, despite months of working alongside the aliens. As head of xenobology at Stanford University, she had been among the first scientists selected to work directly with the Vryaxians. The laboratory where she spent her days gleamed with equipment beyond human design, surfaces that seemed to respond to thought as much as touch. "Good morning, Dr. Phillips," said Zorvex, her Vryaxian research partner. His voice came through a translator device attached to his upper left arm. The Vryaxian stood nearly 7 feet tall, his 4 slender arms moving with fluid grace as he worked at a console. "Good morning, Zorvex. Any progress on the cellular regeneration project?" Karen asked, setting down her coffee. "Indeed. We have increased efficiency by 37%. Soon we can begin human trials for limb regrowth." Karen smiled, still amazed at what they were accomplishing. Zorvex seemed genuinely interested in human biology and culture. He often asked her about Earth music and art, seeming particularly fascinated by dance. The concept of movement as expression appeared new to him. Across the city in a small apartment, Chris Martinez stared at a wall covered in notes and connecting strings. 6 months of watching the Vryaxians had only deepened his concerns. He had been relieved of his position on the security detail after raising too many questions, but that had given him more freedom to investigate. He had recruited a small team who shared his suspicions, including data analyst Olivia Wright from the UNSC Communications Division. "Look at this," Olivia said, pointing to her tablet. "I tracked the embassy transmissions like you asked. There are regular signals being sent to locations throughout the solar system, not just to their main ship." Chris frowned. "What locations?" "That's the thing. They appear to be empty points in space, but the signals are definitely being received. I think they have cloaked ships we don't know about." Chris added this information to his wall. "We need to take this to someone with authority." Captain Rogers is the only one who didn't dismiss my concerns entirely. That evening they met Captain Rogers at a quiet restaurant away from monitoring devices. The captain had aged in the past months, new lines forming around her eyes as she managed the growing partnership with the Vryaxians. "This better be important, Martinez. I'm risking a lot meeting you like this," she said, keeping her voice low. Chris showed her the data Olivia had collected. "They're hiding ships throughout our solar system. Why would they do that if their intentions are peaceful?" Rogers studied the information carefully. "It's concerning, but not proof of hostile intent." "There's more," Olivia added. "The medical treatments they've provided? I've analyzed the chemical structure. There are components that don't match their stated purpose." This caught Rogers' attention. "What do you mean?" "There are nanoparticles in the cancer treatment that remain in the body after treatment is complete. They appear dormant now, but their structure suggests they could be activated remotely." Rogers sat back, her face grave. "That would explain the Second Fleet." "What Second Fleet?" Chris asked quickly. "A new group of Vryaxian ships arrived yesterday. They called them diplomatic reinforcements, but the number seems excessive." Most world leaders accepted the explanation without question. The three looked at each other in silent understanding. Something was wrong, but they lacked definitive proof. And the Vryaxian influence grew stronger each day. Meanwhile, at the embassy laboratory, Karen worked late into the evening. Zorvex had left hours ago, and she took the opportunity to review some of their joint research independently. She accessed the main database, entering her security credentials. A file caught her eye, labeled in the Vryaxian language. Her translator program had improved over months of use, and she recognized the word for human in the file name. Curious, she opened it. The screen filled with information she had never seen before. Her heart raced as she realized she was viewing restricted data. She should close it immediately, but something made her continue reading. The file contained a history of Vryaxian contact with other species across the galaxy. Species categorized by stages: discovery, dependency creation, integration, and utilization. Earth was listed under Stage 2, dependency creation. Karen. Read further, her hands trembling. The Vryaxians had a pattern of uplifting species with technology, creating dependency, then integrating them into their collective as subservient partners. The medical advances contained control technology designed to activate. Once sufficiently distributed throughout the population, a noise in the hallway startled her. Karen quickly copied key files to her personal device and closed the restricted area of the system. She left the embassy with her heart pounding, trying to appear calm. She needed to tell someone, but who would believe her? The Vryaxians had brought so many benefits to Earth. She remembered a conversation with a colleague who had mentioned Chris Martinez and his concerns. At the time, she had dismissed them as paranoia. Now, she desperately needed to find him. It took 2 days of careful inquiries before Karen made contact with Chris's group, now calling themselves Terran Independence. They met in an old building outside the city, away from the growing number of Vryaxian monitoring devices. "I thought you were one of their biggest supporters," Chris said suspiciously when she arrived. Karen placed her device on the table. "Look at what I found. You were right all along." The group gathered around as she displayed the files. Olivia gasped as she translated more of the technical details. "The nanotechnology and the medical treatments? It's designed to be activated remotely to control human hosts. And the energy technology has backdoors," Karen added. "Once it's fully integrated with Earth systems, they can take control or shut everything down." Captain Rogers studied the information grimly. "We need to take this to the UNSC Council immediately." "We can't trust them anymore," Chris warned. "Too many leaders have accepted Vryaxian enhancements already." He was right. In recent months, several world leaders and UNSC officials had publicly received Vryaxian biotechnology enhancements, described as improving health and mental capacity. Director Powell had been among the first, proudly displaying a small implant behind his ear. "We need someone they still trust," Rogers said. "Paul Turner on the council hasn't taken any enhancements. Yet, he might listen." They prepared their evidence carefully, and Paul agreed to meet them secretly. He seemed shocked by their claims, but promised to present the evidence at the next council meeting. They watched the broadcast with hope. Paul began his presentation. But before he could show the critical files, security forces entered the chamber. Director Powell, his eyes strangely vacant, announced that Paul was spreading dangerous misinformation and needed to be detained for evaluation. As Paul was led away, Powell smiled at the cameras. "We are pleased to announce expanded integration with Vryaxian systems. Our friends have opened my mind to greater possibilities. Soon, all humans will understand the benefits of full partnership." The broadcast cut off abruptly. The members of Terran Independence looked at each other in horror. They were running out of time. The members of Terran Independence moved their base of operations 3 times in the week following Paul Turner's arrest. They could no longer trust official channels. The Vryaxian influence had spread too far into Earth's government structures. Their new hideout was an abandoned subway maintenance station beneath New York City. The concrete walls kept most signals from getting in or out, which helped them avoid detection. Karen sat at a makeshift desk, analyzing blood samples from willing volunteers who had received Vryaxian medical treatments. Under the microscope, the truth was clear. Tiny machines floated among the red blood cells, currently dormant but ready to activate. She looked up at Chris and Rogers, her face grim. "The nanites are in every sample. They respond to a specific frequency. Once activated, they can alter brain chemistry, specifically the areas controlling decision-making and free will." "How many people have received these treatments?" Rogers asked. Olivia checked her tablet. "Official numbers say over 300 million worldwide. Cancer patients were first, then heart disease, diabetes, and recently they've been marketing it as a general health booster." Chris punched the wall in frustration. "They're building an army inside us." "We need to develop some kind of countermeasure," Karen said. "I've been working with a programmer named Eric Nichols. He thinks we might be able to create a virus that disrupts their control signals." Rogers nodded. "Keep working on that. In the meantime, we need to warn as many people as possible without alerting the Vryaxians." "That won't be easy," Chris replied. "They've placed monitoring devices throughout all major cities, and people who speak against them publicly are quickly taken in for health evaluations. They don't come back the same." The group had grown to nearly 30 members, all working in secret to resist the alien influence. They used old-fashioned, Methods to communicate, handwritten notes, in-person meetings, and technology disconnected from the main networks. They called themselves the last free humans on Earth, though they hoped that was an exaggeration. On the surface, life continued to improve for most people. Vryaxian technology eliminated hunger in previously impoverished regions. Their medical advances extended human lifespan. Their energy systems made power freely available worldwide. Most humans welcomed these changes with open arms, seeing only benefits. A month after establishing their underground base, Karen and Eric made a breakthrough. They developed a prototype virus that could temporarily disrupt the nanic control signals. They tested it on blood samples with promising results. But they needed a live subject to confirm it worked. Their chance came unexpectedly. Rogers was returning from a reconnaissance mission when she noticed a man behaving strangely near their secret entrance. He moved with an unnatural stiffness, his eyes vacant. She recognized the signs of someone under Vryaxian control. In a split second decision, she knocked him unconscious and brought him to their base. "This is dangerous," Chris warned as they restrained the man in their medical area. "If he reports back, our location is compromised." "It's a risk we have to take," Karen replied, preparing a dose of their virus. "This might be our only chance to test the countermeasure." She injected the man with the virus and monitored his vital signs. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then his body convulsed, and he let out a scream. His eyes cleared, and he looked around in confusion. "Where am I? What happened?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "The last thing I remember is getting a health screening at the Vryaxian Wellness Center last week." Karen exchanged hopeful looks with the others. "What's your name?" "Joe Bennett." "I'm a city maintenance worker." "Joe, I'm going to ask you some questions. Do you feel any urge to report to the Vryaxians right now?" He shook his head. "No, but I remember. It's like a dream. I was watching myself move and speak, but I couldn't control it. They were using me to check buildings, looking for something." "They're hunting for us," Chris said quietly. Joe looked frightened. "What's happening? What did they do to me?" Karen explained the situation as gently as possible. Joe's face went pale, but he nodded in understanding. "I want to help. My wife and kids got those treatments too. Can you help them?" "We're trying to help everyone," Rogers assured him. "But right. Now, we need information. What do you remember about their plans?" Joe closed his eyes, concentrating. "They're preparing for something big. I heard them talking through me like I was a radio. They said final integration begins next month." This news sent a chill through the room. They had less time than they thought. With Joe's help, they refined their virus and developed a delivery system. But reaching millions of affected people would be nearly impossible with their limited resources. They needed a larger platform. Meanwhile, the Vryaxian presence continued to grow. A third fleet arrived in Earth orbit, bringing the total number of alien ships to over 50. Ambassador Krevtal announced the beginning of enhanced integration, describing it as the next phase of human-Vryaxian partnership. The first public demonstration of this enhanced integration came when Director Powell appeared on global news networks. The small implant behind his ear had grown, with metallic tendrils now visible across his temple. His voice had changed, becoming flatter and more mechanical. "The time has come for humanity to join the greater collective. Voluntary enhancement centers are now open in all major cities. Those who join us will experience clarity and purpose beyond individual limitations." The broadcast showed crowds lining up outside newly established enhancement centers. People walked, and looking nervous but excited. Those who emerged moved differently, their faces serene but empty. "They're not even hiding it anymore," Olivia whispered as the group watched the broadcast on a salvaged television. "They don't need to," Rogers replied. "They believe they've already won." The Terran Independence Group worked desperately against time. Karen and Eric continued refining their virus, while Chris and Rogers focused on building a network of resistance cells in other cities. They established contact with the Mars colony, which remained mostly unaffected due to limited Vryaxian presence there. The colony governor, Samantha Kelly, agreed to help, offering the colony as a potential refuge. Their most promising lead came from an unexpected source. Joe recalled overhearing information about the Vryaxian command structure. The aliens operated as a hive mind requiring constant synchronization with the main fleet. Their control signals originated from the primary vessel in Earth orbit, the same ship that had made first contact. If we could disrupt the signal at its source, Karen suggested, we might be able to break their control over everyone at once. You mean attack their main ship? Chris asked. That's suicide. Not necessarily, Rogers replied thoughtfully. I still have contacts in the space service. There might be a way to get a small team aboard. As they began planning this desperate mission, events accelerated on the surface. The Vryaxians dropped all pretense of partnership. In major cities worldwide, those who had received enhancements began rounding up humans who had resisted treatment. Enhancement became mandatory. Enforced by humans already under alien control, the resistance watched in horror as humanity began to lose its freedom not through war, but through subtle manipulation and technology that turned their own bodies against them. The aliens had found the perfect way to conquer Earth, not with weapons but with gifts that concealed chains. They pushed too far, Rogers said, as they finalized their desperate plan. Now we show them that humans don't submit easily. They had one chance to save what remained of human independence. Their plan was dangerous, likely a suicide mission, but they had run out of alternatives. As night fell over a world increasingly under alien control, the last free humans prepared to strike back. The day the Vryaxians revealed their true intentions dawned like any other. People went to work, children attended schools, and life seemed normal until exactly noon Greenwich Mean Time. At that moment, across the world, millions of humans who had received Vryaxian treatment suddenly stopped what they were doing. Their eyes glazed over and their bodies became still. Then, as if controlled by invisible strings, they began moving in perfect unison, walking toward central gathering points in cities worldwide. On screens everywhere, Ambassador Krevtal appeared. But his appearance had changed. The friendly demeanor was gone, replaced by cold efficiency. Metal implants now visibly protruded from his pale skin. People of Earth, the preparation phase is complete. Your planet will now be elevated to serve the greater collective. Those who have embraced our gifts will lead the way. Those who have resisted will be processed separately. Vryaxian collective ships will land in designated zones to begin collection and repurposing of resources. From their underground base, the members of Terran Independence watched in horror as the Vryaxians' ships descended on major cities. The aliens no longer bothered with their previously humanoid appearance. They emerged as their true selves, tall insectoid creatures with multiple limbs and cluster eyes. They moved with mechanical precision, directing the controlled humans to help round up those who had not yet received treatments. It's happening even faster than we expected, Chris said, his face pale as he watched the feeds they had tapped into. Captain Rogers stood up, determination in her eyes. Then we move now. We can't wait any longer. Their plan had 3 parts, each desperate but necessary. Karen and Eric would broadcast their virus to disrupt the Vryaxian control signals, potentially freeing controlled humans. Captain Rogers would lead a mission to Mars colony to establish a secure human stronghold. And Chris would lead a small team on what everyone quietly acknowledged was likely a suicide mission, infiltrating the main Vryaxian vessel to upload the virus directly to their control system. Karen hugged Chris tightly before he left. Come back if you can. He nodded, not making promises he couldn't keep. Just be ready to broadcast that virus the moment we give the signal. Chris and his team of 5 resistance fighters had spent weeks preparing for this mission. They had a small transport vessel disguised as a Vryaxian shuttle, using technology they had stolen and modified. Joe Bennett went with them, having proven himself loyal to the resistance. I still remember their ship layouts from when they controlled me, he explained. I can guide you to their central control node. As they launched under cover of darkness, Captain Rogers prepared her own mission. Mars colony had maintained communication. with the resistance through old emergency channels. Governor Samantha Kelly had secretly been preparing for this day, gathering ships and resources. "We need to move as many free humans as possible off Earth," Rogers told her team. "The Mars colony is our best hope for a stronghold." Back at the underground base, Karen and Eric worked frantically to finalize their broadcast system. They had repurposed old radio equipment and satellite uplinks, bypassing the now compromised global networks. "If Chris succeeds, we'll only have a short window to broadcast the virus before the Vryaxians lock us out," Eric warned. "And we don't know how many people we can reach." "We have to try," Karen replied, not looking up from her work. Across Earth, the situation deteriorated rapidly. The controlled humans moved with ruthless efficiency, herding their uncontrolled neighbors toward processing centers. Inside these centers, people were forcibly implanted with control devices. Some fought back, forming impromptu resistance groups, but they were quickly overwhelmed by superior numbers and Vryaxian technology. In orbit, Chris and his team approached the main Vryaxian vessel. Their disguised shuttle transmitted forged authorization codes, holding their breath as they waited for a response. "Shuttle JS-7, you are cleared for docking Bay 3, came the response in the mechanical Vryaxian voice. Chris exchanged relieved glances with his team. The first hurdle cleared. They docked with practiced precision and prepared for the next phase. Each member carried a small version of the virus in injectable form, ready to use on any controlled humans they encountered. They also carried explosives, a last resort if their main mission failed. "Remember, our priority is reaching the central control node," Chris reminded them. "Everything else is secondary." They moved through the massive ship, guided by Joe's memories. Twice, they encountered patrols of controlled humans, using the virus to free them before they could sound alarms. The freed humans looked disoriented, but quickly understood the situation when explained. "My family is down there," one woman said, tears in her eyes. "Help us reach the control center and we might be able to save them," Chris told her. With additional help, they moved faster through the ship. But time was running out. On Earth, the Vryaxians had already begun repurposing resources, dismantling buildings, rerouting power systems, and preparing landing sites for even more ships visible in orbit. Meanwhile, Captain Rogers reached Mars colony with her small fleet. Governor Kelly welcomed them grimly. "We've been monitoring Earth communications. It's worse than we feared." "How many people can you take in?" Rogers asked. "Our resources are limited, but we've been preparing. We can support perhaps 50,000 refugees if we stretch everything thin." Rogers shook her head. "That's not enough. We need to think bigger." An idea formed in her mind, crazy but possibly their only hope. "What about the mining vessels? Could they be converted to carry people?" Kelly's eyes widened as she understood. "The deep space mining fleet. There are hundreds of ships, designed for long-duration missions." "Exactly. If we gather them all, how many could we evacuate?" Kelly quickly calculated. "Millions, potentially. But where would they go? We can't support that many here." "Not here," Rogers agreed. "Further out, beyond Vryaxian reach." As they began this ambitious planning, Chris and his team finally reached the central control node of the Vryaxian ship. It was a massive chamber filled with pulsing light, machinery unlike anything human technology had created. At its center stood a figure they recognized from briefings, Admiral Zorvex, the true military commander of the Vryaxian fleet. "I've been expecting resistance," the Admiral said without turning. "Humans are predictably defiant." Chris raised his weapon. "Step away from the controls." Zorvex turned slowly, revealing a form more machine than biological. "Your species shows potential. That is why we selected you. Others we simply harvested. But humans have qualities worth preserving in the collective." "We're not interested in joining your collective," Chris replied. "Your interest is irrelevant. Acceptance is inevitable." The Admiral's voice was calm, reasonable. "Those who resist suffer unnecessarily. Those who submit become part of something greater than individual existence." While the Admiral spoke, Joe and another team member circled behind, placing explosive charges on key systems. The woman they had freed moved toward a control panel, ready to transmit the virus. "Now!" Chris shouted. Everything happened at once. The woman activated the panel, sending the virus code into the Vryaxian system. Joe detonated the first set of charges, creating a diversion. And Chris fired at the Admiral, who moved with shocking speed to avoid the shot. Alarms blared throughout the ship. The control node screens showed the virus spreading through their network, temporarily disrupting the signals to Earth. Chris activated his communication device. "Karen, broadcast now. We've opened a window." Back in the underground base, Karen and Eric launched their broadcast, sending the virus through every channel they could access. On screens they had rigged to monitor the situation. They saw the first signs of success: controlled humans stopping mid-motion, confusion replacing blank stares as the nanites temporarily lost their signal. But on the Vryaxian ship, Chris and his team were quickly surrounded. Admiral Zorvex approached, seemingly unaffected by the virus. "Your efforts are commendable but futile. The disruption is temporary. Our systems are already adapting." The Admiral was right. The screens showed the Vryaxian control reasserting itself in some areas, though slower than before. But they had achieved something crucial. They had proven the aliens could be fought. They had given Captain Rogers and Governor Kelly the time they needed to implement their desperate evacuation plan, and they had shown the Vryaxians that humanity would not submit quietly to becoming slaves. As security forces closed in, Chris smiled grimly at the Admiral. "You pushed too far," he said, activating the final set of charges hidden throughout the ship. "And humans don't forgive that." The first explosions rocked the massive vessel, beginning a chain reaction that would cripple the Vryaxian flagship. As chaos erupted around them, Chris wondered if any of his team would survive to see if their desperate plan worked. But even if they didn't, they had given humanity something precious: a fighting chance. The explosions aboard the Vryaxian flagship sent shockwaves through the alien fleet. Ships that had been moving in perfect coordination suddenly scattered in confusion. On Earth, millions of controlled humans paused as the signal weakened. It was a moment of opportunity that Captain Rogers and Governor Kelly seized immediately. The Mars colony sent emergency broadcasts on all frequencies, directing free humans to hidden evacuation points. For months, the resistance had been secretly preparing for this possibility, though few believed it would come to this extreme. Underground bunkers across Earth opened, revealing ships that had been modified in secret. Mining vessels from the outer colonies arrived in low orbit, ready to take on passengers. Karen and Eric worked tirelessly to maintain the broadcast of their virus, fighting against Vryaxian attempts to block the signal. The temporary freedom it provided was enough for millions of humans to escape their controllers and run for the evacuation points. "How long can we keep this up?" Eric asked, sweat dripping from his forehead as he rerouted power to strengthen their signal. "As long as we need to," Karen replied, though she knew it wouldn't be much longer. The Vryaxians were adapting, their systems reconfiguring to block the virus. In orbit, the damaged flagship listed to one side, venting atmosphere from multiple breaches. Admiral Zorvex surveyed the destruction with cold calculation. The attack had caught them by surprise, damaging critical systems, but the Vryaxian collective was nothing if not adaptable. "Reroute all command functions to secondary vessels," he ordered. "Accelerate the control protocol updates, and prepare a direct message to all human resistance points." Chris Martinez and the surviving members of his team had managed to escape, the flagship in the confusion, stealing a small Vryaxian shuttle. As they descended toward Earth, they saw the evacuation already underway. Streams of people rushed toward the waiting ships, while in the distance, controlled humans and Vryaxian forces tried to stop them. "We need to get to the main broadcast center," Chris told his team. "Karen and Eric won't be able to hold out much longer." They landed near the underground base and fought their way through groups of controlled humans. The virus had weakened the Vryaxian hold, but it was clearly wearing off. More and more humans were returning to their controlled state, turning on their neighbors with blank stares. When they finally reached the broadcast center, They found Karen and Eric still working, though the equipment around them sparked and smoked from being pushed beyond its limits. "The signal is failing," Karen said as Chris entered. "The Vryaxians are adapting faster than we can modify the virus." Chris nodded grimly. "Then we moved to the backup plan." "How's the evacuation going?" Eric checked a communications panel. "Better than expected. Captain Rogers reports over 2 million people already loaded onto ships. Mining vessels are taking on thousands more every minute, but it won't be enough for everyone." Their discussion was interrupted by all screens suddenly activating. Admiral Zorvex appeared, his mechanical eyes staring directly at the camera. "Humans of Earth, your resistance is noted and recorded. The damage to our systems is substantial, but temporary. I offer terms, submit now, and your species will be granted privileged status within the collective. Resist further, and we will have no choice but to reclassify Earth as a resource-only world with no biological preservation." The message was clear: surrender or face extinction. The Admiral continued, his voice cold and precise. "You have 1 hour to signal your surrender by ceasing all evacuation efforts. After that time, we will begin planetary resource extraction regardless of remaining population." The screens went dark. Chris looked at the others, determination in his eyes. "Contact Captain Rogers. It's time for Protocol Prometheus." Protocol Prometheus was the last resort, developed in secret by Terran independents. It had seemed like a desperate fantasy when first proposed, but now it was their only hope. Karen sent the coded message to Rogers on Mars Colony, who confirmed receipt with a single word: proceeding. Across Earth and the colony's hidden facilities activated. For months, the Resistance had been building ships, arcs designed to carry not just thousands but millions of humans. Using modified Vryaxian technology, these ships could travel faster and further than anything humanity had built before. They had been the backup plan. The final option if Earth could not be saved. Captain Rogers broadcast a message to all resistance points and evacuation centers. Protocol Prometheus is active. All personnel proceed to designated arc launch points. This is not a drill. In orbit, the Vryaxians detected the sudden activity. New ships appeared from hidden lunar bases and asteroid facilities, larger than the mining vessels and clearly built for long-term habitation. The alien fleet moved to intercept, but they were still recovering from the damage to their command structure. On the ground, Chris and his team fought to defend the broadcast center long enough for Karen to send one final message. As controlled. Humans and Vryaxian soldiers closed in. Karen activated the global emergency system. "People of Earth," she said, her voice reaching every device still connected to the network. "They pushed too far. We turn away forever." This simple phrase triggered hidden subroutines in the virus, activating Protocol Prometheus in the minds of even those humans under Vryaxian control. Deep in their controlled consciousness, the words resonated, creating a moment of clarity. Across the planet, controlled humans paused, then made their choice. By the millions, they turned away from their Vryaxian controllers and ran for the evacuation ships. The aliens, surprised by this mass defection, could not maintain control. The human desire for freedom proved stronger than their technology. In space, Captain Rogers coordinated the massive evacuation fleet. The arcs, each capable of carrying tens of thousands of people, opened their doors to the stream of refugees from Earth. Mining vessels docked with the arcs, transferring their passengers to the larger ships designed for the long journey ahead. Admiral Zorvex watched in growing anger as his controlled army collapsed. He ordered the fleet to fire on the evacuation ships, but at that moment, the charges Chris had planted throughout the Vryaxian fleet detonated. Ships exploded or drifted powerless, creating a protective barrier of debris that shielded the escaping human vessels. "Where will they go?" Eric asked as they watched the arcs prepare to leave. "Somewhere the Vryaxians can't follow," Chris replied. The Resistance astronomers identified a sector beyond the reach of their current technology. They called it Haven. As the last evacuation ships lifted off, Chris and his team made their final stand at the broadcast center. They had rigged the entire facility with explosives, ready to deny the Vryaxians any information about the human destination before triggering the charges. Chris sent one last message to the departing Arcs. Remember Earth, remember what happens. When you trust too easily, remember that some gifts have hidden costs. In orbit, the Arcs engaged their drives, technology reverse-engineered from Vryaxian ships but modified by human ingenuity. They disappeared into the darkness of space, carrying millions of humans to an uncertain future, but one of their own choosing, Admiral Zorvek, stood on the bridge of his secondary command ship, watching the human exodus. For the first time in the history of the Vryaxian collective, a species had rejected integration. The cost of conquest had become too high, the resistance too determined. "Track them," he ordered, but his officers reported that the human ships had disappeared from all sensors. Somehow, they had developed technology that could hide them even from Vryaxian detection on the lead arc. Dr. Karen Phillips stood at a viewport, watching as Earth grew smaller behind them. Captain Rogers joined her, face solemn. "Did we do the right thing, leaving our home?" Karen nodded slowly. "They pushed too far. We had no choice but to turn away. But we're not finished. Humanity will rebuild, grow stronger, and we'll never forget the lesson we learned here." Throughout the fleet of Arcs, humans from all nations, cultures, and backgrounds looked to the stars ahead instead of the Earth behind. They carried with them not just the physical remnants of human civilization seeds, books, technology, art, but also a new resolve. Never again would they trust so easily. Never again would they accept gifts without questioning the price. In the ruins of Geneva, where the Vryaxian embassy had once stood, a message had been left carved into stone. "We choose freedom over submission. Remember us as the species you could not break." Humanity had turned away, perhaps forever, from both Earth and the trust they once freely gave. But in turning away, they found something more valuable: the unbreakable determination to remain free, whatever the cost.